Disruptive technology is playing a critical role in the Israel-US-Iran conflict. So while the focus remains on the Iranian Shahid drones causing damage from Israel to UAE, from Qatar to Saudi Arabia, Kuwait to Oman, the United States is hitting back with Task Force Scorpion Strike. What is Task Force Scorpion Strike? The United States has unleashed for the first time its drone task force called the Task Force Scorpion Strike. The task force has launched countless one-way attack drones targeting vital assets and vital points across Iran. And let me tell you a little more about Strike Force Scorpion Strike. The United States Central Command launched Task Force Scorpion Strike designed to deliver low-cost but high-impact drones to the fighting forces on ground, and these are being used for the first time in these operations, Operation Epic Fury. LUCAS, or Low-Cost Uncrewed Combat Attack System. LUCAS is a drone system manufactured by an Arizona-based company for the first time in 2025. LUCAS, or the Unmanned Kamikaze drone, weighs around 70 pounds. It has a maximum takeoff weight of about 180 pounds. It has an extended range of close to between 600 to 800 kilometers, an endurance of about 5 hours to 6 hours from takeoff to detonation. Once it takes off, it will crash into the adversary in the kamikaze drone form. LUCAS has a cruise speed of about approximately 130 to 135 kilometers per hour, but a dash strike speed of close to 200 kilometers per hour. It can carry a payload of between 18 to 20 kilograms of explosives. So the LUCAS drone can carry multiple kinds of explosives and warheads, including the high explosive fragmentation warhead. What does the high explosive fragmentation warhead do? It can explode in the air and hundreds of shrapnel will fall towards the ground, hitting a vehicle, vital assets, vital points, a military convoy, soldiers on ground, drones it can take on. It also has decoy payloads to saturate enemy air defenses. It carries multiple kinds of explosives, from high explosive fragmentation warhead to shape charge warheads. And shape charge warheads can completely take out an enemy radar, air defense system, their missile launch sites. It uses an open architecture. The LUCAS drone, it uses an open architecture. It allows different kind of payloads and even communication systems. And it can be deployed both for kamikaze strike or a suicide drone, that it goes and hits into a target and detonates and explodes, or it can even be used as a target drone or as a surveillance drone, one-way surveillance drone. The cost, approximately $35,000. Much cheaper than the really expensive state-of-the-art American drones, the MQ-9 Reaper, for example. The Reaper costs, and again, depending on the payload, is about $20 to $40 million. But do keep in mind, the LUCAS is a kamikaze drone, one-time use. The MQ-9 Reapers, you can keep using them again and again and again, and they're far more sophisticated. Their roles are very different. Drone analysts say there is tremendous similarity between the Iranian Shahid drone that was supplied to Russia in large numbers by Iran. Several were recovered by Ukrainian forces, and of course the LUCAS drone design. Delta wing LUCAS drone, and you're looking at those images on your television screen. The Delta wing LUCAS drone is about 10 feet in length, approximately. The wingspan is about 8 feet wide. LUCAS features a delta wing design and a pusher propeller. So this kamikaze drone, it's powered by a 2-cylinder DA215 engine that gives it better fuel efficiency, better endurance, and lower acoustics and lower signature on the radar compared to the Shahid 136 Iranian drone. So what did the Americans do? And this, of course, is grapevine conversation that they recovered a Shahid drone and made something which is even better than the Shahid. Better, more powerful, more endurance. According to reports, it actually incorporates advanced technology like satellite data link integration, AI-enabled mesh networking, and that's amazing for a swarm drone attack when hundreds of those attack drones come and carry out operations. Also, the anti-jamming capabilities and the nose-mounted gimbal camera for very precise target acquisition. The drone, it can operate autonomously beyond the line of sight. It supports mid-flight retargeting also and can be launched in multiple ways. It can be launched via a catapult, it can be a rocket-assisted takeoff or RATO, it can be launched off a truck-based launch systems, or even from ships. And it's an absolute game changer in these operations, according to soldiers who are using them on ground, being used for the first time in operations. So, about a week into this conflict, did Israel and the United States underestimate Iran's capability to strike and strike back, and of course Iran's staying power in combat? Iran has claimed it hit an oil tanker of Kuwait and continues to fire missiles and the Shahid drones in the direction of Israel and Arab countries in the region, targeting American interests and Arab nations. So joining me on this India First special broadcast is Zevika Klein, editor-in-chief of the Jerusalem Post. Zevika Klein, welcome. How does Israel view the progress of this conflict at this stage? Israel and the United States both claim they have total or near total air superiority or supremacy, with 80 to 90% in reduction in Iranian missile and drone attacks, and yet strikes have spread to Azerbaijan and also to Gulf allies. Apparently, they're running low on interceptors to target incoming Iranian drones. Is Israel winning? Is the United States winning? Or is Iran staying very strongly in the battle even now, sir?
Hello, thank you for having me. Israel is winning, and the United States is winning. The amount of attacks and the level and the velocity of the attacks is something that hasn't been seen in years, maybe ever seen before. The sophistication and the cooperation between the U.S. and Israel is so close. Generals in the Israeli army said, they've never spoken so much English, and that's because of the cooperation with these countries. And I'll add another level to that, is we're seeing some sort of a paradigm shift, which is not, totally changed, but the Middle East has changed. Suddenly, there are all these countries with the United States, with Israel, against Iran, when Israel is actually usually the one being criticized and the one that these countries are fighting against. So it's a very interesting and historic moment.
As this battle in West Asia escalates, that's just being described as a mini World War III, President Trump has actually started ramping up pressure on Tehran. There's a new question that's emerging. Is Washington, D.C. now directly exploring the Kurdish front against Iran, opening the second front? The U.S. is engaged with Iranian Kurdish groups, holding talks with Kurdish leaders, though the White House, at least as of now, it is implying that those conversations are linked to the American base in northern Iraq. But at the center of this discussion is the KDPI, the Kurdistan Democratic Party of Iran, an Iranian Kurdish group, an opposition group that's been seeking greater autonomy for the Kurdish people since 1945 and operates largely from bases in the northern part of Iraq. Tehran, however, looks at the KDPI and other Kurdish groups as armed separatist insurgent groups. If Kurdish fighters do enter this conflict, as is widely being anticipated as America's plan B, it may be seen as a major game changer, because the war so far has just largely been fought through airstrikes and missile strikes. Boots on ground may just mean getting the Kurdish people to start from the periphery and start moving towards the core. The Kurdish push could potentially open the ground front along Iran's western border. And we'll just explain that territory to you, because the Kurdish held control partially in Iran, partially in Iraq, partially in Syria, and a small part in Turkey. So that is the wider Kurdish held area of Kurdistan, as they call it there. Officially, Washington, D.C. says its goal remains destroying Iran's missile manufacturing capabilities, missile strike capabilities, their naval capabilities, and preventing Tehran from acquiring a nuclear weapon. But is regime change through the Kurdish people and also through the Sistan-Balochistan route? Is that the plan? At cross-border, Kurdish operations would actually require approval from the Iraqi Kurdistan region, which controls the territory from where such operations are expected to be launched. Iran is actually responding already to any such possibility. Iran has carried out a series of drone and missile strikes on these Kurdish bases in Iraq, and it's escalating. Perhaps that's a warning shot that's being fired. Don't even dare, don't even try. All of this suggests that if the Kurdish front opens, the war could enter an entirely new dimension. We get you more in this report.
A new front could soon open in the war against Iran. Not in the skies, but on the ground. Reports suggest Washington is exploring the possibility of Kurdish fighters launching cross-border operations from Iraq into western Iran. President Donald Trump has told US media a Kurdish attack on Iran would be wonderful and that he's all for it. Trump's remarks is fueling speculation that Washington could be exploring Kurdish forces as a pressure point against Tehran. Reports suggest Kurdish fighters could be armed to launch cross-border operations, forcing Iran to divert troops away from main battlefield. The White House, meanwhile, has completely denied the reports.
The Trump administration reportedly is considering arming Kurdish forces in the hopes of inspiring a popular uprising in Iran. Could you comment on that report?
I could comment on the fact that the president has held many calls with partners, allies, and leaders in the region, in the Middle East. He did speak to Kurdish leaders with respect to our base that we have in northern Iraq. But as for any report suggesting that the president has agreed to any such plan is completely false and should not be written.
The Kurds, a stateless ethnic group of nearly 30 to 40 million people spread across Iraq, Iran, Turkey and Syria, have long had tensions with Tehran. But the idea is already facing pushback. The Kurdistan Regional Government in Iraq has strongly denied involvement. Spokesperson Peshwa Hauramani called reports that Iraqi Kurdistan would help arm or send Kurdish opposition groups into Iran completely unfounded. He says the Kurdish region is not part of any plan to expand the war and instead supports peace and stability. The war is already spilling into Iraq's Kurdish region. These visuals from Erbil show a drone shot near the airport crashing into a residential building in Ankawa. Earlier, Iranian missiles were also reportedly intercepted over Erbil, with smoke seen rising near a US base close to the airport. And as the war enters a more dangerous phase, talk of a Kurdish ground front is growing, even as Washington denies any such plan. With missiles now reaching Iraq's Kurdish region, the conflict between the US, Israel and Iran is clearly spilling beyond its original battlefield. Bureau Report, India Today.
So even as this conversation about a possible Kurdish front against Iran, this conversation increases and intensifies, history actually explains why Kurdish groups remain deeply cautious, apprehensive, and even suspicious about the intentions of Washington, D.C. Because this relationship has long been marked by strategic cooperation and repeated disappointment. Take, for example, 1988. Saddam Hussein carried out a chemical attack, gassing thousands of Kurdish people. Just a few years later, 1991, the first Gulf War, United States actually encouraged the Kurdish groups to rise against Saddam Hussein's regime. March 1991, Saddam Hussein's forces in Iraq, they brutally crushed the Kurdish uprising, and they expected, if the Kurdish groups expected that the Americans would come as the knight in shining armor, that really didn't happen. It was only in April 1991 did the US and allies step in, but established a no-fly zone in northern Iraq to protect the Kurdish population. Then again, let's talk about the second Gulf War, 2003. The Kurdish Peshmerga fighters, they fought alongside the US forces during the invasion of Iraq, and they played a very critical role. You know, when the forces were marching from the north towards Baghdad, these forces played a very critical role in toppling Saddam Hussein. But despite expectations, that independent Kurdish state did not emerge. Kurdish regions remain a part of Iraq, a part of Iran, a part of Syria, and a part of Turkey. History explains why many Kurdish leaders remain very apprehensive. They may be used yet again and abandoned. I want to bring into this conversation Brigadier General Reservist Yossi Kupferwasser. He's heading the Jerusalem Institute of Strategy and Security, joining us on this special broadcast. Also with me is Daniel Silverberg, former Pentagon and Capitol Hill official. Gentlemen, welcome. Great to have you back. Brigadier General Kupferwasser, reports indicate that Kurdish groups have been used and abandoned by the US in the past against Saddam Hussein in Iraq. 1991, 2003. Reports also indicate President Trump spoke to some of these groups and leaders. Will this work this time? How do you read this?
Well, I think the Kurds are part of the Iranian opposition. The Kurdish factions that are located in Iraq are part of the Iranian opposition, and they share the burden of removing the Islamic Republic from power and replacing it with a government that would care about the people of Iran and try to make their life better. And what they have in mind is to have more autonomous power for the Kurds in Iran. They know that the rest of the opposition is very sensitive to the idea that they would like to have a separatist attitude towards what needs to happen in the future. They are aware of that, and I think they are cautious not to cause any trouble in this respect. But unlike many other groups, they are able, if they are being given the necessary equipment and ammunition, they are able to conduct some military operations in the areas of their concern, and that's something that the Iranian government is very worried about. They took all kinds of precautionary steps to face such an attack, and the rest of the Iranian opposition is following it very closely to make sure that there's no separatism, because they are very concerned about that too.
Because if the aim is to target the regime from within and use the people, there is some conversation that you use the Kurdish people in the north, you use the Baluch people in the Sistan, Baluchistan region, there are other ethnic groups, and then from different flanks, the periphery attacks the core. Is that more wishful thinking in your appreciation, sir?
It's hard to say, but I think the major burden lies on the shoulders of the Farsi part of the population, the people of Tehran. In order to topple the regime, you need to cause some demonstrations and to see the people of Tehran take to the streets and remove the power, remove the existing regime from power. That has to happen, and what we are all telling them is that they should be prepared and ready for that when the time is ripe. And for the time being, what we are doing, we are working on weakening the regime and weakening the security apparatuses of the regime, so that eventually the time will be ripe for the people to go out to the streets. Not only in Tehran, but all over Iran, including in other places, in Baluchistan, in Kurdistan, in whatever.
That's a very important point you're making, that you're waiting for the right opportunity, waiting for the right time for the Farsi people, the Persians of Iran to rise, and not just the Kurds in Kurdistan or the Baluchis in Sistan, Baluchistan to rise from the periphery. The core has to explode. Daniel Silverberg, 6 days into this operation or almost a week into this operation, do you see that happen? Do you see the regime weakened enough for the people to rise either in the periphery or the core? Or do you still see the regime very firmly entrenched despite Ayatollah Ali Khamenei being decapitated? Because within Iran, they're saying there'll be a new Ayatollah in place. The systems are still working and strongly.
Gaurav, it's good to be with you again. Thanks for having me. I have to say the pronouncements coming out of Iran remind me of the Baghdad leadership's grand pronouncements in 2003. A lot of bluster and not a lot of reality there. This is unquestionably a system right now under tremendous strain. Clearly, some decision-making capability is still in place. They're able to determine what targets to hit. They just went after an Amazon data center facility yesterday that showed that someone is clearly making targeting decisions. But to say that the regime, everything is fine, business as usual, obviously there's a fair amount of bluster there. The signals that I'm looking for of where this goes from here and whether the regime will crack is, are we going to be hearing from people inside the security apparatus communicating to the US, some even publicly, saying there is an alternative here? We're not seeing those just yet, so I think it's going to be a little bit of time before this regime truly cracks.
Would you want to hazard a guess on the timeline, an informed opinion, considering multiple waves of airstrikes and missile strikes have been carried out on Iran, wave after wave, and America is officially saying 90% of the Iranian missile strike capabilities have been taken out, 86% of their drone strike capabilities have been taken down. How long before they're no longer either an air power, missile power, or even a naval power?
I'm pleased you asked the question that way, because you really have to assess military sector by sector, capability by capability. Unquestionably, Iran is going to be able to harass its neighbors and harass Israel through low-tech drones, through low-level missile capabilities. But clearly, its ballistic missile capabilities has been seriously degraded. I saw a statistic upwards of 80 to 90%. And what people don't realize is Iran wasn't posing just a nuclear threat. The ballistic missile capability was a tremendous regional threat that likely motivated President Trump to want to take action here. So I think the missile threat is degraded. Clearly, the naval threat is degraded. But Iran still maintains any number of asymmetric capabilities that could have devastating global impacts. One, they're showing it in the Strait of Hormuz. If you can't get shipping through the Strait of Hormuz, all countries are going to feel that hurt. Two, don't discount that with Iran's regime up against the wall, they could deploy their asymmetric tools, namely terrorism. There are any number of soft targets throughout the Middle East, Europe, Africa, US embassies, synagogues, what have you, that
True.
Iran could target.
True. Brigadier Kupferwasser, regime change from the air, just like airstrikes, may just be a pipe dream. In your considered opinion, will Israel and the United States have to consider putting boots on ground? Because many in Iran are indicating they're keeping their powder dry for ground operations. Perhaps draw the Americans and the Israelis in, like in Iraq, and then let it be a long-drawn affair.
Well, I don't think there are going to be American or Israeli, definitely not Israeli, boots on the ground in Iran. What we have put forward as a goal of this war is, one, to deprive Iran from its capabilities, and secondly, to create the conditions that would enable the people of Iran to take control of Iran. We never said that we are going to make the regime change by ourselves and by putting troops in harm's way in Iran itself. That is not in the cards in my mind. This is why this is going to take a longer time than it would have if we did put troops in this place. And that's why the President Trump said it's going to take something like 4 to 5 weeks. And there's no time limit. It will take as long as it takes. But eventually we
No
should get
time
a
limit,
different regime in
as
Iran.
long as it takes. So tire the Iranians out. The siege, perhaps, like in the medieval times. Daniel, the last 30 seconds I have on this part of the show, do you look at it as a siege around the capital and then tire the adversary out, make sure he runs out of food, water, ammunition, and then surrender, metaphorically speaking?
General Kupferwasser is one of the best analysts out there on this. I might quibble with one point, though, which is I don't think time is unlimited here. The president might be saying 4 to 6 weeks right now. There is a political time clock on this, and he is at a certain point going to start hearing from his own party saying, all right, let's get back to the US economy here, enough focusing on Iran, even though most Republicans right now fundamentally support this mission. I'm personally also concerned about a strategy of trying to exacerbate sectoral infighting inside Iran, sending Iranian Kurds in rather than trying to dislodge the regime through an air campaign. But I think we will know a lot more in the next 5 days.
Many thanks for watching.